Your feeling of helplessness is your best friend, savage.
Movement can be a powerful thing. Most of us who play games can... It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games. So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this. And also, video games, like, I would love to play video games, but I don't want to go around shooting people and ripping off their heads, and it's just gross. So hence, this is my response to that. Appreciate the importance of a well-timed jump in a platformer or a skillful dodge in a fighting game. But sometimes it's the seemingly ordinary movements that actually tell us the most about a character. The way they do simple things like walk or sit down.
What are you going to say? That characters' walking animation is sexist, or how a character sit down is sexist? How absurd would that be, and how much of a grasp would the person have to be?
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
Well, this video is going to get painfully stupid.
And like anything else about a character, movement can be used in ways that resist tired gender stereotypes, or in ways that reinforce them.
How the flying fuck does a person resist or reinforce gender stereotypes by just simply walking to a place?
In Bungie's hugely successful online shooter Destiny, players start by creating their own character, a guardian who will fight to protect the last remnants of humanity. As with character creation tools in other games, this one lets you choose from different genders and races.
How do you choose from different genders? There's only 2 genders. Unless feminists are going to argue with me over how there's multiple genders, which is fucking stupid.
In most ways, Destiny treats its playable female characters almost identically to how it treats its male characters. For instance, the armor you acquire when playing as a female character isn't sexualized, but looks just as practical and stylish as the gear equipped by male characters. However, there is one way in which the male and female characters are differentiated by gender, and it has to do with their movement. Watch how a male guardian sits down, taking a load off after a long, hard day fighting the forces of pure evil. It's simple, it suggests confidence. When a female character sits down, however, it's a completely different story. She sits like a delicate flower. This is supposed to be a hardened space warrior, and yet she's sitting around like she's Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
Oh my god, look at the sexism. Look at it. Look how this woman sits like a woman. I'm sorry, I fail to see the sexism. It's just a woman slightly sitting down, like slightly different from a male. And I'll bet you anything if that they didn't have any discernible differences between the 2 genders, that she would still be complaining that they're turning the women into a man with boobs. Which I'm still waiting for that episode, Tropes versus Women in Video Games episode. Why isn't she making it? You know, she had enough money to and enough time. Anyway, moving on.
A character's animation and movement is just as much a part of who they are as their appearance and their clothing. And like any other aspect of a character, game designers use movement to communicate information about them to the player. This isn't inherently a bad thing. Expressive character animations are just a way for the game to contribute to our understanding of who a character is and what defines them. How a character walks, jumps, even how they sit down can tell us a lot about them.
For me, all it just tells me is how the character moves.
For instance, Ryu Hayabusa's precise and graceful movement conveys that he is a highly trained ninja. While the way Nathan Drake scrambles and fumbles in dangerous situations is meant to suggest that he's more of a relatable, ordinary guy who just keeps finding himself in extraordinary circumstances.
We were almost in that.
By contrast, the way that women move in games isn't just used to suggest their confidence or their skill or some other facet of their personality. It's very often used in conjunction with other aspects of their design to make them exude sexuality.
You know what I'm going to get you next Christmas? A big wooden cross. So every time you feel unappreciated for all your sacrifices, you can climb on up and nail yourself to it.
For the entertainment of the presumed straight male player.
Oh my god! Straight males are getting entertainment out of their art and entertainment. Quick, we need to kill these immediately. We're extreme prejudiced.
What the hell?
Catwoman from the Arkham series has a deeply exaggerated hip sway when she walks. In combination with her clothing and the game's camera angles, all of this is meant to drive the player's focus to her highly sexualized butt.
Oh my god, you and your weird obsession with butts. I'm thinking Anita Sarkeesian might be a rumpist.
In Resident Evil Revelations, Jill Valentine somehow manages to wiggle her whole body while she runs.
You don't know how movement works. You don't just move your legs, you move your entire body, including your back, arms, and legs slightly.
In Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Evie Frye is a character who avoids falling into many of the sexualizing traps that some playable female characters do, but she still walks with an exaggerated hip sway.
Women do walk with a slight hip sway. They have biological differences, which is not part of the patriarchy. It's part of biology. Their hips are slightly wider, therefore they have to walk with a slight hip sway because they have to give birth to girls and boys. She's just basically arguing over human basic biology, which, I'm sorry, but how is she gonna ascend biology by simply making simple videos on YouTube? She might as well try to climb Mount Everest using a spork.
In Saints Row the Third, you can change your character's gender at any time.
I don't believe she's talking about Saints Row. You know, a game that started out relatively simple and sane and has slowly descended into madness.
If you go to the clinic and swap your gender from male to female, you also come away with a newly sexualized walking animation, even though you're literally supposed to be the same character.
I'd like to point out that whoever's controlling the female character is slightly moving them to the left and right to add a certain level of hip sway to them.
Male heroes are allowed to simply walk like normal human beings in ways that are average or strong or graceful or goofy. Meanwhile, motion-captured animations for female characters often make them look as if they're walking down a runway at a fashion show in stiletto heels.
Yet again with the Bayonetta, you'd think that she's somehow getting her nipples hard just by mentioning it.
Even when the characters are actually in combat situations. Watching these characters' in-game movement animations, you'd think that the director of the motion capture session directed them to walk like a model instead of a hardened space warrior, or master thief, or bioterrorism agent, or crime boss, or vampire, or
John C.
Of course, in the real world, people do walk with a sway of the hips when wearing high heels. If we want to get really technical about it, this slight hip sway occurs in order to maintain balance.
So what the fuck have you been complaining about for the last 4 or 5 minutes or so? Are you intentionally wasting my time, you stupid fucking piece of shit? Honestly, this whole web series is probably the biggest waste of time I've ever thought about. And why did... Ugh. This video is getting stupid all the time. And I thought the last one got pretty fucking stupid. You know what, that's Anita Sarkeesian's only talent that I can see. Is that somehow she can say the most incredibly stupid shit that I ever heard in my entire life. Then a few weeks later, come up with something even more stupider. With this rate, I'm going to have a brain aneurysm before it's finished. Just out of sheer stupidity. Out of having a headache from how dealing with this stupid shit.
This in and of itself is not a problem, other than generally being deeply uncomfortable.
They're not fucking real. They have no sense of pain.
But it raises an important question. Why are these female characters in combat roles wearing high heels?
Because it might look cool? That's a big guess. But anyway, you've chosen the wrong example of Ada Wong there, because she wears stiletto heels for 2 reasons. One, because it makes her look slightly sexualized and distracts her enemies. And 2, because she keeps a knife in there.
With all the fighting, running, and climbing these women have to do, dressing them in heels is clearly a decision rooted in sexualized aesthetic pleasure rather than believability.
Considering Bayonetta has you fighting God in the middle of space while you pile drive him into the sun while Fly Me to the Moon plays, so I think realism in certain instances is about as applicable as using a garden fork to try and eat your dinner. And plus, with certain games, you could probably put them in clown shoes. That's how pointless this is.
In fact, animating so many female characters in games to fit into this very gendered, sexualizing walk pattern.
You know what? I was actually trying to see if I could find a video of Anita Sarkeesian walking to make sure she didn't walk with an over-exaggerated hip sway, but I couldn't find any. So let me know if you can find any videos of Anita Sarkeesian walking, just to make sure she isn't being a massive hypocrite.
Is an example of one of the ways the male gaze manifests in video games.
Oh my god, this video's gotten 10 times more stupider just from that sentence alone.
The term male gaze was coined in 1975 by feminist film critic Laura Mulvey.
Is it me or do the ugliest people on the earth seem to want to have an interest in how everybody else fucks, or is sexually objectified, or strips, or does anything that is sexualized?
And refers to the tendency for the visual arts to assume and be structured around a presumed masculine viewer, or in this case, player. The male gaze manifests when the camera takes on a perspective of a stereotypical heterosexual man.
Yes, because as we all know, there are no such things, movies or pieces of art and entertainment that are designed to please the female viewer. Funny enough, I was actually in the cinema during the scene of that guy taking his shirt off, and being in a room full of 16 to 17-year-old girls wetting themselves was something that I'll treasure for the rest of my life.
An indisputable example of this is when the camera lingers, caresses, or pans across a woman's body, although it's not always that obvious. In games, it can be as simple as the in-game camera resting so that a character's butt or breasts or both are center line.
You know what I'm going to get you next Christmas? A big wooden cross. So every time you feel unappreciated for all your sacrifices, you can climb on up and nail yourself to it.
It can be a cutscene that rests on a woman's butt. It can be clothing that they are wearing or the way they talk. Or it can be as basic as the way a female character moves around the game world.
Here's a good idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
The male gaze reinforces the notion that man looks and the woman is looked at.
Yes, because as we all know, women don't look at men with a certain level of objectification. Personally, I'm the only person who can really not complain about sexual objectification, because none of you know what I look like. I could be butt ugly, or I could have the chiseled abs and a stern jawline. Baby. It's the mystery that makes it all exciting for me. But anyway, moving on.
Or as art critic John Berger explains in the 1972 book Ways of Seeing, men act and women appear. Men look at women. Women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relations between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves.
Honestly, are there any homosexuals or lesbians watching this that, you're not somehow feeling insulted by this, that you're somehow you can never have anything that sexually objectifies another woman or another man or so on and so forth? Because believe it or not, what Anita Sarkeesian is complaining about is basic human biology, finding somebody sexually attractive so you can pass on their your genetic legacy down through the ages, which has been going on long before we were born and will continue long after we're dead, buried, not completely forgotten about.
To be clear, the male gaze is not a hard and fast rule. It's a theoretical concept that is meant to help us understand the sometimes subtle and nuanced ways in which our culture influences media.
I've got a question. Why didn't Anita Sarkeesian become Amish? I mean, seriously, she complains all about pop culture, and the Amish don't have that. All they have is, building wood sheds. Okay, I know jack shit about the Amish other than they have very little to no technology. But hey, Anita Sarkeesian would love it. She doesn't have to worry about online harassment because there's no wireless modems about. So therefore she can't get online harassment. In fact, why didn't she become an Amish? I'm going to set up a Patreon so we can have Anita Sarkeesian become an Amish. I'll get on it as soon as the eventual heat death of the universe, which is the estimated time when Anita Sarkeesian is going to finish this video series.
And the way that media, in turn, can shape and reinforce existing gender dynamics in our culture.
I think Anita Sarkeesian is putting way too much emphasis on pop culture. For me, it's just a way for me to sit back, relax, and enjoy
The male
myself for a
gaze is
few
also
hours
not in
every
any way
night.
limited to men or
Anita
heterosexual
Sarkeesian
people.
somehow thinks that all pop culture is going to turn people into mindless zombies that are going to ravish and destroy humanity.
Almost all of us internalize and sometimes
we're all going
identify
to
with
have
the male
to
gaze
drink
to some
Red
extent.
Bull and defecate in a bucket if she doesn't somehow stop pop culture from doing what pop culture does.
Eradicating the male gaze is not as simple as introducing an inverse female gaze that sexualizes men either.
And honestly, there's nothing that Nia Sarkeesian could do to destroy the male gaze, because she's going against basic biology, i.e. people finding people sexually attractive, so therefore they can pass on their genetic legacy down through the ages, like we've been doing long before we were born, and we will continue doing so long after we're dead, buried, and we've been forgotten about. Fuck me, I just repeated myself. Anyway, moving on.
Not just because equal opportunity sexual objectification isn't the answer.
Well, for me, personally, it is, because that seems to be fair and equal, and you're a feminist, so therefore you should be about equality. What you don't want is equality. You want to have your own way all the time, which overwrites everybody else's right to indulge their fantasies, which I've previously stated in other videos. For me, video games are the ultimate fantasy. You can have ugly people being hot. You can have severely poor people driving cars that they wouldn't be able to afford or even look at in an everyday society. Or you can charge headfirst into battle with your sword held high, charging headfirst. But anyway, now I'm just starting to ramble a bit.
But also because it isn't actually equal. One reinforces pre-existing oppressive ideas about women that are real and damaging to women in their everyday lives.
You fucking sexist, and I'm gonna call Anita Sarkeesian a fucking sexist. That's because what she fucking is. She's saying somehow that all women are being trampled on and kept down in the dirt so she can somehow make herself feel better, which is in and of itself sexist. And that's what she fucking is. And I'm gonna just call Anita Sarkeesian the sexist from now on.
The other doesn't reinforce anything.
Fuck you! Fuck you and kiss my ass, you sexist piece of shit!
Nor are the two interchangeable. For example, when the satirical website The Hawkeye Initiative reimagines male characters in sexualized poses that are common for female characters, it isn't using the female gaze. This is just the male gaze applied to men.
You know what I'm going to get you next Christmas? A big wooden cross. So every time you feel unappreciated for all your sacrifices, you can climb on up and nail yourself to it.
When male characters are depicted as shirtless or wearing little clothing, like the character sometimes dubbed Hot Ryu from Street Fighter V, their lack of clothing demonstrates their power and strength, rather than depicting them as erotic playthings or reducing them to sexualized body parts.
They're digital constructs, and for me, this is pure subjection on Anita Sarkeesian's side. It's more revealing of her own pre-established values and beliefs than what she thinks of other people's. And for whatever reason, I think Anita Sarkeesian is being a complete sexist at this point. And for every finger that Anita Sarkeesian points at pop culture, there will be an equal number pointing right back at her. Because she is a complete sexist, and I have all the intention of just calling her a sexist until the day I die. And anyway, I'm starting to ramble a bit on, so moving on.
The same is true when it comes to movement. Male characters get to move in ways that emphasize all sorts of characteristics and personality traits, but there's a whole world of untapped potential for representations of female characters who aren't animated in ways that frame them as sex objects.
There are plenty of games that don't have overly sexualized walking patterns. There's Faith from Mirror's Edge, that Jodie from Beyond Two Souls, and Jade from Beyond Good and Evil. That's three just off the top of my head. I'm fairly certain if I actually went through my entire game collection, I could mention more. But this video is running a little bit too long, and I want to get off and do certain other things, like playing video games and watching hardcore pornography.
But who get to be just as stealthy or strong, swift or imposing, clumsy or graceful.
Are you actually going to make any of them? Or are you just going to sit here and complain like a whiny little bitch that you are? Because that is the only way that I will take any of what you've just said remotely seriously, is if you put your hand into the fire and risk it all. Or you're just gonna take the path of least resistance like you've often said that rest of society does? Or you're gonna be a massive hypocrite?
The way Ellie moves in The Last of Us communicates a sense of tension and danger, demonstrating what it's like when female characters are animated in ways that emphasize their personality and emotional state, rather than serving to sexually objectify them.
She's 14 years old! The reason why they don't sexualize her is because she's underage. They don't want to come across as overtly pedophilic. Which, considering Anita Sarkeesian's sphere of influence, isn't too surprising, considering I think 2 or 3 of her friends are actually open pedophiles.
The path to equality and liberation does not lie in equally reducing men and women to objectified parts.
Which technically they're not objectified parts, they're objectified people, or in video game terminology, they're objectified digital constructs. You're not going to have like a pile of sexualized boobies hanging around. Although that would be kind of funny, just a pair of omnipotent boobies flowing around. Boobies. Anyway, moving on. I don't want to get distracted by boobies. Breasts! Jiggly wigglies! Ooh, I just want to grab a nice big pair and bury my head in between them and go...
But by treating people of all genders and with all types of bodies as full and complete human beings.
They're digital fucking constructs. They have no independent will. And personally, what you're complaining about is sexual objectification, which for me is inherently neutral. You cannot say one way or another that it's inherently harmful to society, because it's what has brought us here to this moment. So anyway, moving on, I'll see you all in my next video. Bye then.